The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Aubrey McLaughlin. I'm the Director of Alumni Professional Networks for the University of Maryland Alumni Association. We're excited you're able to join us for today's webinar, Financial Bootcamp for New Parents, presented by Veronica Fuentes and DeVaughn Hodge. This webinar is part of the Alumni Association's Professional Development webinar series, in which we hope to provide thought-provoking and valuable content that help alumni like you achieve your personal and professional goals. We have a lot of information to cover today, but we will be taking questions throughout the duration of the webinar. Please feel free to submit any questions you have using the question box that's located in the GoToWebinar control panel. Veronica Fuentes is born and raised in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and graduated from the University of Maryland with a Bachelors in Finance in 2012. In a short 7 years of her career, Veronica has built a reputation as one of the nation's leading Latina Certified Financial Planners. Her DC-based practice, in partnership with DeVaughn Hodge, serves over 400 clients across the country, working with successful clients and entrepreneurs. Clients are provided with financial tools and guidance they need to make their visions a reality. When not working in the big city of DC, you can catch Veronica at the pool or at the beach. DeVaughn Hodge, originally from Brooklyn, New York, is an esteemed financial advisor that has been serving in the DC metropolitan area since 2014. Mr. Hodge began his partnership with Northwestern Mutual as a college intern while completing his undergraduate degree at Howard University. After graduation, DeVaughn continued his practice as a full-time financial advisor, specializing in comprehensive planning, from risk management to investment and wealth preservation and distribution. In his free time, he enjoys working out and coaching youth basketball. And now we will get started. Veronica and DeVaughn, take it away.
Thanks, Aubrey. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today for Financial Bootcamp for New Parents. As Aubrey mentioned, I'm Veronica Fuentes, Certified Financial Planner with Northwestern Mutual, and here with me is my co-advisor.
I'm DeVaughn Hodge, Financial Advisor with Northwestern Mutual.
So we all know that having kids has an impact on our finances. The question is how much and what we can do to plan for it. That'll be the focus for our discussion today. We are going to cover a lot of ground, but know that if you have any questions along the way, please type them in the question box and we'll be sure to stop to answer any questions that you have. And in the end, we hope that you'll have the information you'll need to help create financial security for you and your growing family. So here's a quick agenda of what we're going to be covering today. So first, you can't plan for tomorrow without knowing where you are today. We're going to go over a budget exercise that'll help you have a better idea of what you're spending and where. Next, we'll talk about the ways in which your income and your expenses may change after having a baby, so you have a good idea of the kinds of things you're going to want to plan for. With that information in hand, you'll want to reassess your budget based on the changes you expect to your income and to your expenses once you have the baby. We'll walk you through a hypothetical example of what that might look like. Then we'll talk about the importance of protecting your ability to execute your financial plan, which includes the necessary steps to take in case something goes wrong. This brings us to a discussion about how to help protect your income and the key estate planning documents you'll want to have in place. And finally, we'll cover investing and planning for your child's college education if that's important to you and your family. With that being said, is there anything else anyone on the line was hoping to cover today, or any questions before we get started? Awesome.
Okay, now let's begin with where we are today. I'm going to share a version of a monthly budget worksheet with you all, and we'll also send a link to an online version that you can utilize as well. Now, as you review this worksheet, let me ask a question. How many of you currently have some sort of defined monthly budget that you stick to?
So right now I've launched a poll. If everybody can take a moment just to select one of the two options that are here. We'll give it just a few seconds. And we'll just collect the response. We will share the responses with everybody as well. And we'll close this poll and I will share it. So it looks like 57% do stick to a budget and 43% do not.
Nice. So as we all may know, sticking to a budget can be a bit of a challenge, but that's why it's important to create a budget that's not only challenging, but also realistic. As you can see from this worksheet, this budget includes a pretty thorough list of essential expenses, which cover things that we can't live without. On the top right corner, you'll see discretionary expenses, and these are the expenses that we can reduce or eliminate. And under that are saving and investing. After this call, I would strongly advise that you take some time to complete this budget on your own time. And you may not know all of your expenses offhand, but fill out what you can. Now, as we take a look at our current spending, I'd like you to compare it to something known as the 20-60-20 rule. This is what we should shoot for. So within the 20-60-20 rule, 20% of our income should be set aside for a month for savings and investing. Now, this covers both short and long-term investing. 60% of our income should be spent on essential expenses like mortgage, rent, utilities, and groceries. And the remaining 20% of our income should be spent on discretionary expenses, such as vacations, entertainment, and eating out. So on this next screen, you'll see we have completed a budget worksheet that shows how the 20-60-20 rule is applied for a couple whose household income is $100,000 per year.
Yep, and we just want to point out, so if we take a close look at this, if we're following the 20-60-20 rule of thumb, we can see with this couple, they make $5,700 of net monthly income down at the bottom. So 20% of that is $1,140 a month. So they are saving 20% of their income. If we look at that orange column to the right, $540 is going to their emergency fund. $500 is going to savings for midterm goals, and then another $100 is going to retirement savings. Now, it's important to note that in this retirement savings line, this is not dollars that is already being deducted from your paycheck. This is stuff that you're doing in addition to that. On the discretionary expenses, you can see they're spending less than 20% on discretionary expenses. So they're spending $1,015 for discretionary. So they may not necessarily need the whole $1,140. With the essential expenses, 60% of $5,700 would be $3,480, $3,420, I believe. So actually, they're spending a little bit more than what the 60% rule is, but it's not a hard rule. So because they're spending a little bit more in essential expenses, their discretionary expenses are a little bit less. But at the bottom line, the total surplus / deficit, they still have a surplus of $65 a month after all expenses and savings. Now, this is an example of a budget before a baby comes into the picture. Later on later in the presentation, we'll go over a budget, the same budget, but what happens after you introduce a baby into the picture.
Now, if you're like most people, setting aside 20% for savings may be a bit of a challenge. And even if you are able to do that today, it may be more difficult as we continue to grow our family. And this is true for two reasons. One, your income may change. And second, your monthly expenses will certainly change.
Yep. So let's talk about income first. If you're working now, what are the ways in which you expect your household income will change once you have a baby? In the very short term, if you're working, you're probably going to take some form of maternity leave. And partners, if you may also choose to take some leave if that's an option for you. But long term, your income will certainly change if you're working now but choose to stay home permanently. Either of these scenarios will obviously have an effect on your income you're bringing home. Moms, if you take maternity leave, your income will likely be cut by 20, 30, or 40% during the weeks you take off. Why? Because short-term disability is designed to replace only a part of your salary, usually between 60 and 80%. And it's called short-term because it covers you only for a limited time, typically 6 weeks. So think about what that means for you in the first few months after having a baby, and especially considering your added expenses during that time, which we'll get into in a few minutes. If you're thinking about staying home permanently, you may be weighing the financial pros and cons you can afford. Well, of course, you'll want to consider the loss of income if you stay home, but on the plus side, you probably won't be spending as much on things like parking to go to work, gas, professional clothing expenses, etc. So you've got to think through all of the financial pieces and parts. If you choose to leave the workforce, you'll also be making fewer or no additional contributions to your 401k or savings. So you want to evaluate the longer term impact to your retirement and overall financial plan.
Now let's talk about expenses. Some common expenses you are probably already experiencing are things such as getting a nursery ready, purchasing a car seat or a stroller. To get a handle on what to expect next, we are going to discuss some of the more common expenses and some expenses that may come up as a surprise. The first shocker may be your hospital bill. If you don't have insurance, the cost of having a baby in the hospital can set you back anywhere between $10,000 to $25,000. If you do have insurance, you still may need to come up with a few hundred or a few $1,000s, depending on where you live, the type of delivery you have, and what's covered by your policy. So what's important to remember here is that almost certainly we'll have to pay something. So in the meantime, if you haven't already done so, find out what we're going to be responsible for now so that we can plan accordingly, and also understand what your deductible and out-of-pocket maximum payments are for you and your new baby. Now let's move beyond the hospital bill. You may have seen the average cost of raising an only child to the age of 18 can be close to $300,000. Now this includes costs for things like food, clothing, childcare, education, and healthcare. And this is all before they head off to college. Of course, this is an average and it can be a bit intimidating, but remember, there are ways to decrease costs.
So here's a look at how your expenses will likely change over time. The money you spend on diapers, formula, and daycare over the first few years will gradually give way to funding healthcare, food, private schooling, and extracurricular activities. And then, as your child becomes a teen, you'll be adding in expenses for electronics and transportation and potentially sports, which can be very expensive, especially if your child joins an elite or traveling team. So you can see that your expenses don't go away, they simply shift over time. Now let's go back to our example couple and see how the additional expenses of a child affected their budget. Savings and discretionary spending have decreased to fund the increase in their essential expenses. This is very common among new parents. And that's why we say our 20-60-20 rule is just a guideline. Priorities do change, and while cutting back on entertainment and vacation is okay, it's important to continue saving in a few areas, which we'll get to in a bit. So if we look at this, what are some ways this couple could shift their spending to increase the amount they're saving? If you have any thoughts, please drop them in the comment box. But I'll just point out the differences here. So on the previous slide, this couple was saving $1,140 a month. Now they're saving $660 a month. Their discretionary spending originally was $1,015 a month. Now they only have $430 allocated to miscellaneous spending. And their essential expenses, they were spending $3,480 per month. And now they're spending $4,610 a month with the baby in the picture. So some of you might be looking at this and saying, wow, how in the world do I make this work, or how am I going to make it work when we have other financial goals that we're trying to save for, such as a house, a child's education, or for your own retirement? It's not unusual to feel overwhelmed, but you can alleviate a lot of anxiety with two things: a solid financial plan and the discipline to stick with it. So let me take a second to ask a question here. How many of you actually have a written financial plan that you follow?
So again, we have a poll that should be showing up on all of your screens. You just take a second to complete your answer. We will share the results with you very shortly. Okay, just about 5 more seconds here. Okay, it looks like 25% have a written financial plan and 75% do not yet have a written financial plan.
Okay, so we have some work to do. So a financial plan is important because it can help you prioritize your goals and provide a strategy to achieve them one step at a time. So for people like you who are probably on the call who are preparing to add to your family, a financial plan will likely identify a set of critical first steps followed by some secondary steps, as you can see here on the slide. So let's take a look at these one at a time.
So the first critical step is to establish an emergency fund. Now, the general guideline for your emergency fund is to have at least 6 months worth of our living expenses in an easily accessible account, such as a savings or money market account. Now, this fund could also help you cover some of the big one-time expenses we talked about earlier, such as hospital bills or even income that's lost during maternity leave.
The next critical step is to protect your income stream. When you think about all the plans you have for your family and the goals you have for your future, most of them probably need to be funded. So you've got to protect your ability to generate an income. That's done two ways, with disability income insurance and life insurance. And I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes on each one of these. First, disability income insurance. We talked about short-term disability income insurance a few minutes ago as it relates to maternity leave. Here, I'm talking about disability insurance as it relates to illness or injury that may prevent you from working and generating a paycheck. Before you had children, you may have been willing to weather the storm a bit and cut back on your expenses if you needed minor surgery, for example, and had to go without a paycheck for a while. With a baby, you can't necessarily do that because the stakes are higher. So how does disability income insurance help to protect your growing family's financial security? Think about it this way. You insure your home, you insure your car, and even your cell phone. Why do you do that? Because if anything ever happened to them, you'd want to be able to replace them. But what's more important than your paycheck? Isn't that worth protecting too? And if you decide to stay at home after your baby is born, that work has real value too. After all, if you couldn't take care of your child anymore, how much would you have to pay someone else to do it? If you're like most people, you're probably thinking that the chances of becoming disabled are pretty slim. So we're going to take a quick poll. Love to get your opinion on Do you feel like 1 in 100 chance that you'll be disabled at one point? Do you feel like it's a 1 in 1,000 chance you'll become disabled at some point, or 1 in 4 chance? One of these is the right answer. So take a second to share your opinion here.
Okay, and we'll leave this open for about another 10 seconds or so. Collect the responses. Okay. And we have about 46% that said 1 in 100, 38% that said 1 in 1,000, and 15% that said 1 in 4.
Awesome. So that's what we expect. A lot of people don't think there's a high probability of becoming disabled at some point. The truth is there is about a 1 in 4 chance you'll become disabled and unable to work at some point in your life. And that's because it's not just major car accidents or heart attacks that can prevent you from working for an extended period of time. A disability can be chronic back pain, migraines, depression, and extended illness like diabetes or cancer. So when you include all of those things, that 1 in 4 stat makes much more sense. Now, a lot of employers provide disability coverage for their employees. It's a great benefit, but most of those workplace-sponsored plans have limits in place, which means it may not cover everything you need for the time you need it. And if you change companies, that coverage typically doesn't go with you either. What if your company doesn't offer coverage at all, or if you're self-employed? Individual disability coverage becomes even more important then. The good news is that individual disability insurance is usually very affordable, often less than what you pay daily for a cup of coffee. And that policy moves with you no matter what job you move to or if you decide to start your own business. Before we move on to the next section, any questions about disability income insurance? Okay, so we'll move on.
Okay. Now, the other way to protect income is through life insurance. Life insurance provides money in the form of a death benefit to your beneficiaries if you should pass away. Now, although no one wants to think about this, especially when we're focusing on the joy of a new baby, it's actually one of the most critical pieces to consider even way before the baby is born. There are two basic types of life insurance. We have term insurance and we have permanent insurance. Now, term life insurance is temporary. It provides death benefit coverage for a specific period of time. So similar to renting an apartment, you pay rent for a period of time, but when the lease is up, that's it, it's over. And if you die during that time, your beneficiaries receive the proceeds, assuming that your premiums were paid in full. Because it's designed to be in place for a specific amount of time, most people buy term insurance to cover financial obligations that would disappear over time, such as a mortgage, business debt, or even the cost of raising children throughout their college years. Term insurance is also the most affordable type of insurance. So it allows you to get the greatest amount of coverage for the lowest initial premium. And this is what makes term insurance a more desirable option, especially for people who are just starting out or who need it only for a defined period of time. Some term policies allow you to convert the term policy over into a permanent policy, but it must be within their allotted time window to prevent having to requalify for medicals or pay renewal premiums. One thing to keep in mind is that if you determine that you do need insurance after your policy ends, you'll be starting over, and your costs will be based on your current age and medical status. Comparing that to permanent life insurance, which is more like owning a home, this is insurance that is designed to stay with you for life, which is why it's called permanent. And because you own this policy, as you continue to make your premium payments, you build equity within the policy. And we call this equity cash value. And over the time, cash value becomes quite significant. Now, why is this important? Mainly because the cash value can become very handy down the road. So we can use this money to make a down payment on a home, start a new business, cover the cost of an unexpected emergency, pay for childhood education, or even supplement some of your retirement income. Now, before we move on, any questions about life insurance?
DeVaughn, we had a question from one of our audience members on the line asking if there are any affordable options for folks with pre-existing conditions.
In regards to life insurance, so it depends on what those pre-existing conditions are and how long they've been around, what the severity is, if it's under control with medication. So each person is individually underwritten. We would just need to know more specifically what that condition is. For some conditions, it doesn't even pose a problem to get some life insurance. It just all depends case by case. So that's something if whoever asked that question, if they're willing to share, they can contact us directly and we can give a more hard answer on what those prices would look like.
What about with it being in respect to disability insurance other than the employer provided insurance?
Yep, so the same thing. So typically if you're getting disability insurance through a group plan, you don't go through individual medical underwriting. So if it's a group policy, they just ask the name of the person, the age, how much they make, and what's the position that they work for in the company. So if you do have some severe pre-existing medical conditions, it's a lot easier to get it through your group plan than it might be on an individual basis. But again, it all just kind of depends on what is that pre-existing condition, because it really might not be that severe where you couldn't get something on your own as well for an affordable price.
Thank you.
Yep. So next up, in terms of critical steps, is retirement savings. So even if you'd been pretty good about contributing to your 401k or your IRA before you have a baby, you may now be struggling with the question, what's more important, saving for retirement or saving for my child's education? It's much like the instructions given by flight attendants when you travel by air. So they typically say, in case of emergency, put your oxygen mask on first and then help your child out. So same thing here. Although you may wish to fully fund your child's education, don't put your own retirement at risk. If you don't take care of funding your own retirement now, you may end up having to work longer, changing your vision of what retirement means, or you might have to rely on your kids in retirement. So the bottom line here is this. Kids have options for funding their education with loans and scholarships. Retirees don't. So do everything you can to continue contributing to your retirement savings accounts, even with all your new expenses. If you have to cut back the percentage you contribute, do it, but at least contribute enough to take advantage of your company's match, if there is one. Next up, in terms of critical steps, is estate planning. For many of us, when we think of estate planning, we think of it as something only the older or the rich people need. But that's simply not true. Everyone needs an estate plan, and here's why. Estate planning is about making sure your wishes are known and honored if you die or become so ill you cannot make your own decisions. And that can involve everything from making sure your baby receives a family inheritance to ensuring your children will be cared for by whoever you designate. So what do you need as part of your estate plan? Here's what we recommend. All adults, meaning 18 years and older, should have these three essential documents. The first is a healthcare power of attorney. With this document, you name someone as your agent to make healthcare decisions on your behalf if you become incapacitated. The second document you want to have is similar to the healthcare power of attorney, is a living will. This is sometimes called a healthcare directive. The living will is given directly to your doctor and clearly states how much or how little medical intervention you'd want if, for example, You get in an accident or become so ill that you can't communicate them yourself. And finally, you'll want to establish what's called a financial power of attorney. Much like a healthcare power of attorney, this document names a person you trust as your agent to manage your personal financial affairs, like paying your bills or preparing tax returns if you become unable to do so yourself. Now, if you are married or have a partner, you'll want to do a few additional things. First, you probably want your spouse to be your power of attorney for healthcare and for finances. So update those documents. You'll also want to update the beneficiary designations you might have on assets like life insurance policies or retirement accounts. And you'll want to establish a will or a trust that spells out who gets what after you're gone. All of which brings us to the stage of life you're in now, becoming a parent. When you have a child, the single most important estate planning step you can take is making sure that your will names a legal guardian for your child or your children. So you have to think about, who do you want to take care of your child if something should happen to you? It's not enough to simply share your intentions with a person you want to be the guardian and make a handwritten note of your instructions, because some states won't recognize estate planning documents that are handwritten. So make sure that you will formally nominate a guardian for your child should something happen to you. Generally, the other parent is named as the guardian, with a third trusted individual named as a standby guardian in case something happens to both parents. Once you have children, you'll also want to take yet another look at your powers of attorneys, your living will, and beneficiary designations, and all of your other estate planning documents to make sure they reflect your wishes for your growing family.
So that covers the 4 priority financial steps. That's establish an emergency fund, get income protection in place or disability, stay the course with retirement savings, and last but not least, get the basic estate planning documents in place. Any questions on these topics that anyone would like to ask before we move on? Okay. Now, the other 2 steps that are typically part of a family's plan to achieve financial security are investing for other financial goals and saving for your child's college education. Now, because these are what we consider secondary steps, we're not really going to spend a lot of time on those today. And that doesn't mean that they aren't important, because they are. But at this stage of the game, as we're welcoming a new member of our family, the first 4 steps should be a bigger priority. In the same token, if you can carve out money to invest, by all means do so. Even if you start with just a few dollars a week, you'll be accumulating wealth by taking advantage of the power of time and compounding. Now, in terms of funding your child's college education, first think about how you want to support your child. Do you want to pay for all schooling, or do you want them to have skin in the game and pay for a portion or all of the cost? It may surprise you, but when couples are discussing their finances, the topic of how much they'll help with schooling is often missed. It's something you should talk about, because even if your approach towards finances tends to be similar, this is something that many couples have different viewpoints on. The next thing you should know is how much it should cost. Understanding what tuition may look like in 18 years might be a little shocking and could impact the decisions on how much you want to save or how much you want to contribute versus how much you can contribute to support your child. So think about this. For a child born this year, you can expect to pay almost $21,000 a year for a public 4-year in-state school. A private nonprofit school will cost significantly more, and the cost of college increases every year. Now, of course, there are a number of ways you can approach saving for your child's college education, from Coverdell education accounts to 529 plans and other options. But the main key is to start early. So right about now, you may be thinking that there are a million things you should be doing. and it could be easy to feel overwhelmed. So just take a deep breath. To help you get started, we created a checklist to help you along the way. And feel free to take a quick screenshot of this checklist. At a high level, here's how we recommend you tackle the things in front of you. So first, let's determine your current budget. It's important to gain clarity on your cash flows of what's coming in the house and what's going out the door, so that we can be more efficient with leftover dollars. Next, identify what your health insurance and short-term disability income insurance will cover. Let's understand how your budget will be impacted by changes in both income, also short-term and one-time expenses. Next, let's learn about the benefits available to you at work and help you close the gap with individual disability income and life insurance. Next, we're going to begin to establish an emergency fund if you have not done so already. And remember, the emergency fund consists of 6 months worth of our living expenses. Next, we're going to talk with our partner or our family members about your estate planning wishes and work to get a plan in place. We're going to continue to save for retirement. And last but not least, let's evaluate education saving and investment options that are available to you.
Okay. By the way, these slides will be made available after this presentation. So if you didn't get a chance to take a quick photo of that slide, of that checklist, don't worry, you'll have it after this webinar. So just take it a step at a time. Start to map out a financial plan for your growing family's financial future. It can be very helpful to talk to a financial professional when you're going through the process of prioritizing and figuring out a strategy to achieve your goals. If you decide to work with a professional, for example, like DeVaughn and myself, we'll take you through a personalized planning process to help you build a comprehensive strategy to meet the goals you have now. And we meet with our clients to regularly check in going forward to make sure you're staying on track and help you adjust your plan as your priorities change throughout your life. Now, because we've talked about a lot here today, I'd like to take a moment to reference the other two attachments to this webinar. The first postcard is a 24-goal postcard. And I'd like to take a moment to encourage you to write something down. It doesn't have to be on the postcard. I know you have to download that. But if you have a piece of paper nearby, write something down that you can accomplish in the next 24 hours to help you make progress towards your goals. And post it on your fridge, leave it on the seat of your car, or tape it to your dashboard of your car. Just put it somewhere where it'll remind you to go back and complete that next step. The other postcard is a more longer-term goal. So for this one, I would encourage you to write a bigger financial goal that you plan to work towards within the next month. And if you'd like some accountability, feel free to email us your 30-day postcard, and DeVaughn and I will follow up and check in with you a month from now to see if you accomplish your goal. So with that, I think we're going to open it up to questions. Thanks so much for having us. And this is one of a 3-part series. So of course, if you'd like to learn more about any of these topics we've discussed and how they might fit in your own financial plan, please contact us. Our information will be made available after this webinar. And I'm happy to follow up with you on a one-on-one basis if that's more helpful. So thank you, and we'll open it up to questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Veronica and DeVaughn. Just a reminder, if you have a question, we have a question box located in the GoToWebinar control panel where you can type in your questions, and we'll be taking those for the duration of the hour. I also, similar to what Veronica had mentioned, there are a couple of handouts that are available for you as a takeaway. and those are also in the GoToWebinar control panel as well. So please feel free to download those. We do have a question here specific to budgeting. What, if any, automated tools do you recommend? They've heard quite a bit about Mint, but have concerns about sharing personal data such as credit card and website logins, etc.
So Mint is a very popular one that we find that our clients really enjoy. Do you have any other suggestions on budgeting apps? We know that a lot of people use their own bank's budgeting tools. So a lot of banks nowadays have some kind of budget tracking analyzer. Northwestern Mutual also has a budget tracking analyzer. If anyone wants the link for that, we can send that over. But most of these budget tracking analyzers will want links to your savings accounts, your checking accounts, your credit cards to have a very thorough track of where you're spending your money. I know QuickBooks is another one, especially if you're a business owner, but QuickBooks, I've seen personal people use that as well. And I think another one is called Expensify. Expensify, I think, is more of a newer app, and I've heard some people liked using that app as well. DeVaughn?
And I will also add in an app called Digit. So Digit, what it does is it tracks your expenses and it analyzes what you're able to save based on your expenses on a monthly basis. So yeah, Digit app.
Great, thank you so much. We do have more time for questions if there are any questions. Again, if you also just feel comfortable connecting with Veronica and DeVaughn more one-on-one, I will be sharing their contact information in a follow-up email later today. So please feel free to get in touch with them to discuss more personal details about your questions. We'll give it just about a couple more minutes here to allow any last-minute questions to come in. Veronica and DeVaughn, do you recommend ID theft protection for insurance?
Oh, yeah, ID theft protection. Yeah, some of our clients definitely have that through different softwares. But another cool thing that I don't think a lot of people know is if you don't plan to use your credit anytime soon, you can actually freeze your credit. You can unfreeze it at any time as well. So, but I would encourage people, there's a way to freeze your credit if you just go to one of the credit bureau's website, and you can freeze it for, I believe, up to 6 months. So if you don't plan to buy a car, if you don't plan to apply for a loan, a credit card, any of that jazz, then you can definitely freeze your credit. That's an easy way where you're not actually paying for some kind of ID protection.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we'll just allow a couple more minutes here for any additional questions to come in. As Veronica and DeVaughn mentioned, you will be receiving the slides for today, as well as the handouts, as well as the recording of today's webinar. So you have all the information that you need, and that will be also sent in the follow-up email later this afternoon. Do you cover how to create the power of attorney documents? Is there an online source for that?
We typically advise that people partner up with an attorney or lawyer to get those estate planning documents done. There are some online tools where if you just Google the name of the document that you want to create, there are templates online. And I think there's features like LegalZoom. So sometimes LegalZoom is offered as a benefit through some employers. If not, it's something you can personally subscribe to on your own as well. And that's an efficient, cost-efficient way to create some of these documents if you don't plan to go to an attorney. But I think it's always good to get advice and feedback from a professional. So we always encourage people to partner up with an attorney, and we have a few contacts that we could share here locally in the DMV area.
Great, thank you. Is there any thing that you want to cover, Veronica and DeVaughn, that maybe you haven't covered? Any last minute thoughts or ideas just regarding this topic?
No, I think we covered a lot on our call today.
Awesome.
I think that's all.
Great, thank you. Well, looks like we have covered all of the questions that we have. I just want to thank you both for taking the time to host today. I want to thank everybody for joining us on the webinar. We hope that you found today's content valuable and helpful as you are thinking about growing your families. Thank you all again very much, and go Turks. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.